Welcome to the Measuring Impact with Power BI webinar. Our agenda this evening is as follows. What is Power BI? What can Power BI do for my business? How can I integrate Power BI with location intelligence? And how can I get started? A little bit about Blue Raster. We are a small business formed about 20 years ago. We're headquartered in Arlington, Virginia. I'm speaking to you today from Bethesda, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. And we are specialists in GIS, web application development, business intelligence, among other things. We're also a Microsoft partner and an Esri partner. These are some of the organizations we've been working with specifically on Power BI solutions, ranging from startup and training, deployment help and implementation, back-end, front-end, or a combination of all of the above. A little bit about us. My name is Phil Satlof. I'm a program manager with Blue Raster. I've been on the team for 7 years. I just had my anniversary last week.
And my name is Shannon Lindsay. I do Power BI here at Blue Raster, and my background is in monitoring and evaluation of public health programs. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started. Phil, thank you so much for kicking us off. I want to say a huge thank you again to everyone who joined. We know that you all have many different ways you could be spending your afternoons and evenings right now, and we appreciate that you're spending it with us. We hope that by the end of today, everyone walks away with at least one new thing that they've learned, whether that's about Power BI deployment on the whole, or a tip and trick, or something about using location intelligence inside of Power BI. We just hope that everyone is able to take something away from this. Alrighty, so what is Power BI? I would imagine if you are here, you have some idea of what Power BI is, but we wanted to jumpstart with just a quick example of what Power BI is and how it can be used to measure your impact. And that is whether you are a nonprofit organization, if you work in government, or if you are working for profit. Any company needs to have an eye on what's going on inside of your business. And I come from the nonprofit side, and typically we are trying to see what is our impact, how are we using the money that we've been allocated, and how are we reaching people. So I wanted to start with this nice example of a project that I worked on over the last few years. And this was actually working with the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. The project that we were working on was a point of care testing program for early infant diagnosis of infants who are exposed to HIV. So all of that is a mouthful, but all of this is to say the point of the project was to get infants tested for HIV at birth, because without that testing and diagnosis, 20% of infants will die before 8 weeks. So we really want to make sure that we're getting babies tested and that their caregivers are getting results. So with all of that being said, with conventional testing at the beginning of the project, we had an average turnaround time for results to caregivers, so from the health facility back to the parents, of 55 days. So thinking about, the fact that we have really 8 weeks to act quickly, 55 days is not ideal. So with the implementation of this project, we managed to get the turnaround time down to 0 days, and we made sure that 98% of results were reaching caregivers. So this was a really interesting project to be a part of, and this dashboard itself actually was developed because the donor requested it. So it was really easy for us to take that donor request, and we took our internal dashboard that we were using for enhanced monitoring of the project, and we pared it down a little bit and posted it to the website. So this is just one example of how you can use Power BI to monitor your impact and, make it public facing so that yourself and your donors and whoever needs to see this report can look at it. Alrighty, so very quickly, I'd like to do a little bit of a poll. I know some of you have probably been doing business intelligence or location intelligence your whole careers, but this BI is a bit of a buzzword to me. So I'd like to kind of just poll the room. You can take yourself off mute or you can type in the chat. But what does this word BI, business intelligence, what does this actually mean to you? Actionable insights, boom. Okay, Martin, hi, nice to see you. I would agree with you 100%. I mean, this could mean so many things to so many different people, but at the end of the day, we all need to make decisions based on data. And I know that I'm sure every single one of us here works at an organization that says that we are data driven and we're making decisions based upon the data that's coming in at that moment in time. But I think the reality may be a little bit different. So let's jump into what that is. We do know that nearly everyone in an organization engages with software and engages with data. But just having the data or having access to the data does not necessarily mean anything, and it would be wrong for us to assume that. So we need to make sure that everyone has access to the data, but not only access, but that we are producing actionable insights, just like Martin mentioned in the chat. So the idea behind Power BI and behind enterprise business intelligence is making sure that everyone has access to the data that they need at the moment that they need it to make that decision. And then we're not saying, oh, which version of that spreadsheet did this come from? Or, you know, when was that data last refreshed? It's making sure that everyone has the information that they need at that moment. All right, so Power BI, what is this product that we're talking about today? I know many of you on the line have seen Power BI before, so if there is a nugget of wisdom that you'd like to add, feel free to type in the chat or take yourselves off mute. But we just wanted to present Power BI for those of you who maybe have never seen it before. Power BI is an industry leader in business intelligence. We do not work for Microsoft. Full disclosure, I started using Power BI about 5 years ago when it first came out, and it completely changed the way that I work. And that's why I do what I do today. So it may sound like I'm, you know, drinking the Kool-Aid because I am, but the idea is just that this should make all of our lives easier and get the data into your hands. So Power BI allows us to bring data together in new ways wherever you are. It gives you a live 360-degree view of your data, and it allows you to really see a single version of the truth under one pane of glass. So if you are an executive and you want to see what's going on in each of your different departments, you can look at one dashboard that shows you all of the information that you need. And then if you'd like to ask questions or see details about specific pieces of information, you can drill down into those specific departments and see what's going on. Most importantly, Power BI sits on top of or is a part of the Office 365 tenant is what it's called. But so if you use Office 365 as an organization, you already have access to Power BI. And that's the really nice thing about it. So every single person is able to download Microsoft Power BI from either the Windows Store or the web and go ahead and get started using it. Power BI is, I hate to use the word powerful because obviously it's redundant, but Power BI is really powerful because it allows you to connect to hundreds of data sources all from one place. So if you are working at an organization where a lot of your data collection is being managed by the business or is being managed by programs and it's not structured in a database, you can connect your Power BI report to a folder that has a bunch of Excel files in it. And at the same time, you can connect your report to a website that has, I don't know, specific information that you may need. You can connect to many different sources all in one place. Power BI allows you to visualize your data, and the data visualization capabilities inside of Power BI are getting better every day. I think there are many of you on the line I know that have seen this product kind of evolve, and Power BI and its data visualization capabilities can do a lot more than it could even just a year ago. Power BI allows you to share insights across your organization, and you can embed those insights into your app, into your website, into your SharePoint site, into your Teams client, whatever kinds of platforms you are using as an organization. You can embed Power BI right into there so that people have that information inside of the apps that they interact with every single day. The key to the Power BI platform is really threefold. So Power BI developers are going to connect to data and work on reports in Power BI Desktop. This is a desktop product, and it is available for Windows computers. It is not available for Macs at this time. So developers work in the Power BI Desktop to connect to data and build reports. We then are going to be throwing around this word called the Power BI service, and all that really means is Power BI in the web. Okay, so we've got Power BI Desktop for building, Power BI service for collaboration with other developers, and then your users of the data are going to access reports either through the service, so in the web on a computer, through the mobile application. There's one other piece of information that I wanted to point out in this diagram, thinking about the overall architecture, and that is this little piece of add-on software called a Power BI Gateway. This is really important because many of us are trying to connect to data that is on premises. So some organizations, for security reasons, you don't store your data in the cloud, and that should not be a barrier to using Power BI. You can connect to that data using the gateway, and you can get everything automated and make sure that your data is flowing so that your users have it at their fingertips. All right, so I'm assuming that a lot of people are here because you either have started using it and you want to learn more, or you're thinking, what is this Power BI product? Why should I use it? Tell me more. So here we go. Why should you use Power BI? Power BI can help you to stay ahead of competitors. Power BI can help you to clearly demonstrate your impact, and that is really why we're all here today. Power BI can help us to uncover insights in your data that you may not have anticipated or you may not have expected. And because that data is at your fingertips, it allows you to course correct. I know that in the nonprofit world, a lot of us are fighting over the same small pool of resources, and we want to make sure that we are using those resources responsibly. So Power BI allows us to take a look at what's going on in our projects and programs as they progress. You have that information. You can see how many beneficiaries you're reaching. You can see what's going on in the field, and you can then course correct. To me, the nerdiest and best feature of Power BI that I, as a developer, really appreciate is Power BI's semantic model. So what that means is Power BI has inbuilt data modeling and transformation tools. It's something called Power Query, which has its own in-memory storage. We could go on and on with this, but what I want to mention is that Power BI is different from other BI tools in that it has this right in the product. You're able to shape the data, and then as you make those transformations to the data, it treats it as an assembly line, and then when new data comes in, all those same transformations get applied. So that to me is really the key to success of Power BI and automating data cleansing, data collation, different things that you're doing with your data. Most importantly, money is a big issue for every business. Power BI is really cost effective. Like we mentioned before, Power BI is a part of Office 365. Licensing comes into play when you talk about sharing Power BI reports, and that's something we can take offline if people have specific questions about licensing. But Power BI is very cost effective. It is $9.99 per user per month to be able to use Power BI as a consumer of the data. I also really want to emphasize today that Power BI is easy to learn. The barrier to entry is low, and I mean that for developers, people who will be building reports, as well as consumers and people who need to make decisions based upon that data. There is a very low barrier to entry, and I always like to say, if I can learn this stuff, anybody can, okay? It's very easy to learn. Power BI as a product can connect to almost anything. If there is not an out-of-the-box connector that exists for the data source that you are trying to connect to, you can always build a custom connector to connect to that data. How many times can I say connect in one sentence? A lot. But so Power BI can connect to almost anything, and the real key is that it can connect to different sources at the same time, and you can then see that all in one report or dashboard. And then most importantly, Power BI is easy to collaborate. It's easy to eliminate data silos. Power BI is secure. You can have all of your information in one place. And that is where I will stop. Like I mentioned before, Power BI allows you to track your data in real time. In a lot of our experience with the clients that we currently work with, it's really important to understand who in the field where there may not be any internet, where records are paper-based, and that is then being entered into some sort of an electronic system. Decision makers and people who control budgets, maybe people sitting at the ministries of health in the country, can make decisions immediately based upon this data. And I think that we have all seen, in the era of COVID, dashboards are everywhere. We're seeing them all the time. So the idea behind today is to understand how can we implement dashboards ourselves, and how can we integrate that with the already existing geospatial intelligence that some of you all may have done using ArcGIS.
Okay, one of the most compelling use cases for Power BI is that you, and yes, you, have the ability to do so much so quickly. There's no complicated install process. You can use multitudes of web-based or local data sources. You can spin up an interactive prototype in minutes and share it with your stakeholders. Once you get past that initial exploration period, it's really easy to use. And as Shannon mentioned before, it's compatible and it can integrate with many, many technology solutions. If you're an Office 365 user, you already have it, and you can use it in many of the Microsoft solutions. ArcGIS, of course, as we're going to discover a little bit more deeply. And you can make custom visualizations with R, with Python. There's really so much that's in there, and it's right out of the box. How to integrate business intelligence with location intelligence? Well, what is location intelligence? I'm paraphrasing Wikipedia here, but location intelligence is the process of deriving insights from geospatial relationships. And there may be one or two of you on this call who don't know what GIS is. Among other things, GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, are the tools and techniques that are used to discover location intelligence. According to Forbes, there's a chance that 80% of your data has a location element to it. So let's tap into that. Why ArcGIS? Esri ArcGIS is a powerful platform for leveraging your spatial data. If you have tools like ArcGIS Online, Pro, or Enterprise, good news is you can integrate them easily into Power BI. However, you do not need to have any of those tools or even any experience with them to make amazing maps with the ArcGIS Maps for Power BI visualization. It's included out of the box. It can be used instantly for free. It's really easy to use. You can have multiple layers. You can access public data. If you do have that account, you can bring your own content in there that you've curated. It's easy to customize. And of course, it's fully interactive with your other data that's in Power BI. These are a couple examples of some recent work we've been doing. This is from the energy and sustainability sector. This is a visualization of a methane cloud that's leaking out of some pipes in Texas. This is for public safety visualization of bicycle crashes in Montgomery County, Maryland. The blue ones are hit and run, so you better watch out for some of those areas in Bethesda there. And this is using data from our very favorite data source, the DHS program, showing malaria bed net distribution and also prevalence and children who slept under a net in Nigeria. And now I'd like to talk about our work on the TRACE initiative. The TRACE initiative is CDC funded and administered by UCSF and Columbia School of Public Health ICAP team, and that's who we've been working with. The initiative is aimed at identifying clusters of people with recent HIV infections, and recent HIV infections are more easily spread, and the thinking is if we can intervene, we can stop the spread of disease. Another main goal of the program is capacity building. So the donors decided that they wanted to use a commercially available, low-cost, off-the-shelf tool that can be easily implemented, trained, and adopted in multiple countries with various experience levels. And that has a vocal community of users in nearly every country across the globe. Working with ICAP, we advised the initiative to adopt Power BI with ArcGIS, and here's what we did. Using sample data, we developed a Power BI report template that's hosted here in the tracerecency.org website. The landing page has high-level key metrics. All these reports are available for anyone to download. The data is completely filterable and cross-interactive. Clicking on the map will filter the other visuals. You could click on the visual to filter the map, and you can easily reset the whole visual by clicking on the map again. Different indicators require different visuals. All these are separate reports that are downloadable one by one for plug-and-play use if the data is set up correctly. Here is an example of the same template within the Power BI service. So if you wanted to restrict your data to a certain user pool, this is a very good solution to use. Here's a quick shot of the Arcgis Maps visual, and you can see easy to filter. And this is a sneak peek. You can embed other web tools right into your Power BI application. This is an ArcGIS Online Operations dashboard. I'm going to talk a little bit about that more in the next demonstration. Here it is, same data, different view. Really easy to customize. Once your data is in the Power BI service, you have endless opportunities to visualize it. This is another example of the energy sector projects we've been working on with Microsoft. Earlier this year, we started collaborating with Microsoft on a methane control project. Airborne methane is a climate hazard, and we developed some tools and techniques using Sentinel 5P satellite imagery to visualize methane in the atmosphere and display it on a map in Power BI. In this example, we've used the satellite imagery to enrich the well locations using ArcGIS imagery server, and we piped them back into Power BI. The size of the symbol denotes the amount of methane, and the color is for the different operators. Again, all this data is connected. We can easily filter it for a drilled down view of the data. If we wanted to select some of the operators, we can select chevron and cog, and we can see that the visual filters just on this data. This Power BI app also has two Esri ArcGIS Online web app builder applications embedded right within it. One of them is for calculating the distance to the nearest well, and the other one is used to calculate the cost of building a new pipe to control leaking methane instead of flaring it into the atmosphere. So these are right within the Power BI service. The user goes to one destination, and then when they're done, they simply transition back to the Power BI report, and to them, it's all one seamless experience. And with that, I will transition back over to Shannon.
So Phil just took us through a bunch of different examples of how we can use Power BI and how we can embed ArcGIS Maps in Power BI. But I think what everyone here is here for is to understand, okay, yeah, I get it, it can be done, but how do I do it? So we're going to do a quick demo where we're going to actually build a report. But before we do that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the deployment process. So generally speaking, when you are implementing any sort of new technology platform, we all know this, it's not really about the technology, right? It's about the people and the processes and how everything gets rolled out and deployed. So we have a system that we like to use with our clients, and this is not a secret. I think probably everyone who deploys Power BI would do this similarly, but we really like to make sure that we start with requirements gathering, that understanding what the requirements are. We help people figure out, architecture and licensing, how they want to deploy. Do you want to deploy on premises using the Power BI report server, or are you okay with your information being in the cloud? How are your end users going to be accessing the reports? From there, we like to step into training. So it's really critically important that everyone gets trained. I don't know if you all have ever worked at an organization where they've rolled out a new platform. I mean, I'm just thinking of now that we all work from home, some of us probably had to learn how to use Zoom or Teams or WebEx or one of those platforms overnight. I would imagine that your organization had more success if they provided you some training. So we're big advocates of providing training, not only for those who are going to be building and developing and administering the reports, but also for the end users. Technology is not necessarily intuitive, so we want to make sure that everyone gets trained up. We then we like to harp heavily on governance and adoption strategy, making sure that things are being done the correct way and that we're really keeping in mind, the security and the requirements of IT at the organization. We then will encourage people to build, test, and deploy. And then, of course, to monitor usage, gather and incorporate feedback, and then the whole cycle starts again. So a dashboard is never done. If you're working in Power BI or any other technology, we just wanted to throw this in there really quickly that we've got to emphasize the people and the processes. We can't just talk about the technology alone. But with that being said, let's talk about the technology. So how do you get started? The first way to get started is to download Power BI from the Microsoft Store. If you do not have an Office 365 account, that is okay. I will drop a link in the chat after I stop talking, where I'll show you how to sign up for a trial Office 365. You don't have to put in any credit card information, and you can then use this for 60 days completely free of charge. But anyone can download Power BI Desktop and use it on their PC. If you have a Mac, you can use Power BI in the web, but connecting and getting data is going to be a little bit more challenging, but it can be done. So download Power BI, open it up, see what's going on in there, connect to data, pull some data in. From there, you have the opportunity to shape and transform your data. Remember, Power BI has that semantic model inbuilt, and you're able to do an entire ETL process, so you can extract, transform, and load your data within the Power BI tool. Now, for those of you that are familiar with databases, it's not replacing a traditional ETL, but it is in addition to, and you'll see how that can be really helpful. Then you're going to build your visuals, which is the shiny, fancy, fun part. Not my forte, but something that I like doing. And then, of course, you're going to share your masterpiece. So make sure that the people who need to access and use the data can use it. Just very quickly, I want to give you guys an overview, and I will also drop the link to this image in the chat as well. But what you see here on the screen is Power BI Desktop. And there are a bunch of different controls. It takes a while to understand where to access which controls in Power BI Desktop, but we're going to actually go through that right now. So I am going to open up Power BI and we're going to run through this from scratch. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to import some sample data. It's all completely fictitious, using the data that we used initially for one of our energy projects. So we're going to be looking at the locations of oil wells, and then we're going to be looking at a fictitious amount of methane in the atmosphere over those wells. But I want to demystify this. And what we're going to do is we're going to drop in an ArcGIS map into this report, and then we're going to publish it. And you're going to be hopefully shocked by how simple it is. All right. So when you open up Power BI Desktop, there's this big obnoxious yellow screen. If it annoys you, you can just deselect this show screen on startup. But this is where I really like to start. Right here, you're going to go ahead and connect to your data. So I'm going to click Get Data. Now, I know already that I have this data stored locally. It's on my machine. It's in the form of a CSV file. Now, Power BI, as I've mentioned too many times to count, can connect to almost anything. So you have the option to connect to all sorts of different data sources in here, but we're going to keep it simple and we're going to connect to a CSV file. Okay, this is just for the purposes of demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and click connect. And from here, I'm going to navigate on my desktop to the file that we're going to be using for the demo. When you click open, if you are connecting to a CSV, Power BI will give you a preview of what this data is supposed to look like. So this will be your first step in, okay, am I doing this right? Does the data look right? Is that the right file? Are those the columns I expect? This is a great place to start. And this is what you will see if you're connecting to either Excel or a CSV file. Okay, now the next thing you want to do is not necessarily intuitive because they're trying to trick us with this big yellow load button, but we actually don't want to click that. We always want to transform the data so that we can open up Power Query. Now, what is Power Query? As I mentioned at the beginning, Power Query is the in-memory storage that sits behind both Excel and Power BI. So if there are things that you see that we do in here that you think, oh, I work a lot in Excel and that would be actually really useful in Excel, you can do this in Excel as well. But one thing I wanted to show you is we are now looking at the query editor. Now, let me minimize this quickly. I do want to point out that there are two windows open now. So you've got the front end of Power BI open and you have Power Query, the query editor open. Okay, now we just did a few clicks to connect to that data. We didn't do much at all, but what you can see here is that I have 4 columns of data and you can see a little bit of information about the data itself. Okay, so how many distinct values do you have? How many unique values do you have? Do you have any empty values? This column profiling, for those of you that are analysts at heart, this is going to be really useful for you. From here, this is where you can make any transformations that you want to make. So for example, if we bring us in a CSV file that's some sort of an export from a different system, and you know that every time that that data comes in, you need to remove the first 2 rows, for example. You can go up here, navigate on the ribbon, on the home tab of the ribbon, you can navigate to remove rows, remove top rows. We're going to remove the top 2. And then every single time data comes in from that source, each of these steps are going to be applied. Okay, this right here is the magic sauce behind Power Query. It's something called the M language for mashup. We're not going to get into it today, but I just wanted to show how you can apply these steps and you can then transform your data. So we're going to go ahead and click close and apply. There's lots more you can do in here, but we're not going to go over that right now. What is really critical is we want to get a map on the page. So as this data loads, I just want to point out a couple of things. Over here on the left-hand side, you have 3 options in Power BI. You can look at the report view in the front end of Power BI. You can look at the data view. So if you want to maybe sort and filter and look at your data, do some investigating, this is where you'd want to do that. And you also have the opportunity to look at your semantic model. Now, we only have one query in here, one table of data, so this doesn't really show you much. But let's get to building. Okay, first things first. If you want to build a report and you want to use geospatial intelligence, you need to make sure that your data types are set properly. That is step 1. So I'm going to go ahead and select my latitude column over here. I'm going to click my cursor in the middle of the column. And up here on the column tools tab of the ribbon, I'm going to select latitude. It's as easy as that. Okay, I'm then going to do the same thing for longitude. And then we're just going to go ahead and build a map. I am going to select from the visualizations pane of Power BI Desktop. I'm going to select ArcGIS Maps for Power BI. Okay. From here, it may or may not, depending on how recently you've opened this, it is going to ask you to sign in to ArcGIS using your organizational credentials. I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Sorry, give me just 1 minute. The demo gods were not with me today, but that is okay. Alrighty, so now we are signed in. I have an organizational ArcGIS account, and that is what I'm using here. So what we're going to do is I am new to mapping. Let's say I've never made a map before, but I know that my boss or my people who are going to be using the data want to see a robust map that has multiple layers that tells us something about the data. Okay, so I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to start by just dragging my latitude and longitude into the field wells here. So latitude goes in latitude, longitude goes in longitude. And what you will see here are the first 10,000 wells in the data, which in this case are located in Texas. Okay, so now let's add one more piece of information to this, and then I'm going to ask Phil to walk us through some customizations that we can make to this map. So I'm going to go ahead and just add, I would like to see the enriched methane value as the color of the dot, just to mix this up a little bit. And then as a mapping newbie, I'm going to ask Phil, okay, Phil, how can we make this more informative? What can we do to this map?
Well, Shannon, if you open up the menu on the left there, there's several options within. First, if you were just looking for a place on your map, you could find it there. But we already know we're in Texas. If you open up the next widget, here you can go in and actually change your symbology and your theme of your map. So, for example, let's say we wanted a heat map, or if we wanted size or clusters, this is where you do that kind of change. There are several options available. You also have some other controls over the style of the map. If you go further down, you can switch up the base map. Don't forget, the base map is a layer of contextual data. It's very important. If your own organization is sophisticated enough to have a custom base map, you can find it here. Or you can pick from Esri. They have many, many awesome base maps to choose from. The next widget is where you can do some really neat things. You could do an infographic that would pull data from Esri, and you could have, like, let's say, a little widget that shows you the population of the area, the map you're zoomed in on. Hopefully it's low near the oil wells, but you never know. The next tool is really powerful. If you open this, this is where you have access to not only Esri's data sets like the demographics or Living Atlas data sets, which have data for everywhere around the world. There's global, there's regional, there's USA data sets in there. But your own data sets, if you have your own curated content, your own layers that are specifically set up to make your map really tell a compelling story, this is where you can find them. You can add multiple layers. Maybe you want to put streets, hydrology, what have you. You can do all that with this tool.
Thanks.
And there's also one more tool hidden in there, and that is the drive time analysis. So this is important for many data sources. You want to see if you're a pizza shop, for example, right there. How many customers are around me? How far does my driver have to go?
Thanks. All right, so I hope that there was a question earlier in the chat, I think it was from Lisa, that asked how to actually do this and can you incorporate ArcGIS content? So I hope that we've answered that question. Phil, thank you for helping me make this map a little bit more informative. Let's go ahead and add one more visual to this Power BI report. So let's take a look, for example, at how many wells we have. So how many wells are we looking at? I'm just going to drag the field into the field well. I'm going to get a count of my well dimensions, and that is probably microscopic on your screens. But what I'm going to do here is show you that we are looking at around 200,000 wells. Okay, now I can change the styling of this by saying, you know, I want this to look like a whole number rather than an abbreviation. You can change the titles. And last but not least, you can change the styling of your whole report. If your organization has branding that you need to use for every single thing that you produce, you can import your own company's theme, or you can select from some of the inbuilt themes. Okay, so I think from start to finish, with dropping this map on here and adding a couple of visualizations, that was probably about, I don't know, 15 clicks, maybe. So what we want to show you guys is that this is simple. Okay, barrier to entry is low. All right, we are nearly there now. Let's say that I want to publish this report because I want Michael and Stephen to be able to look at it. I'm going to click publish here, and then you will have an option of where you want to publish it. So then your consumers are going to consume this content in the Power BI service in the web.
Okay, so we see one right here from Tanya. Can you publish or share a report created with an ArcGIS organizational account with people who do not have an ArcGIS online account? I know there are a lot of people from Esri on this call, and I'm wondering if any of them would like to take this. Is Art still on the call?
Yeah, hi, hello. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Hi, Scott.
Hey. So if the content is all publicly accessible, you will be able to do that, but the content does need to be publicly accessible. There's also some distribution methods in Power BI, such as publish to web and embedded, and support for those are coming. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
There are some that were posted. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, when Scott mentions publish to web and embedded, an example of some embedded content would be that same report that we were looking at the beginning of the call is actually embedded right into Elizabeth Glazer's website. So you can see that here. Just a quick example. Go ahead, Phil.
Allison McAndrew asked, do you always click transform no matter the data source? And that's for you to answer, Shannon.
Sorry, someone knocked on my door and it startled me.
Yeah.
The question was, do you always need to click transform? The answer is unless your data is absolutely perfect and structured and has been worked on and maintained by a DBA or by your IT team, the answer is yes. You will always need to transform your data in the query editor. The reason for that is just because data is never perfect. There are always some cleansing steps that you need to do. There may be some additional columns that you need to create. Maybe you have a column where you need to parse some data. You need to split it by a delimiter. You almost always need to transform your data. Yes. If you just click load, if you click that shiny yellow load button, what will happen is that the data will simply be loaded to the model. So you'll see it over here in your field well, and you'll be able to use it, but it may not be in the shape that you need it to be in to use Power BI the best. Now, speaking of using Power BI the best, there's one topic that we did not touch on at all, and that is ordinarily when you're building Power BI reports, you need to create some calculations so that your data shows some actionable insights, right? So there is a formula language called DAX, which for many of you will probably look similar to Excel formulas. And that is the formula language that is used in the front end of Power BI, where you can do, like let's say we want to do a distinct count here. I'm just going to do a new measure. These are called measures. And I'm going to say, give me a distinct count of the data that is coming from my sample enriched daily methane table from dim well key. Okay, so that is an example of writing DAX. I just clicked off of that. Demo gods weren't with me, but yes, is the answer to your question.
And Lori asked, the company branded theme, is that shared across all Office 365 apps?
Yes. So I actually will show you an example of how that works. At Blue Raster, I'll just show you a little bit of how we use Power BI. We have our Power BI tenant branded with our signature blue and with our logo here. When I have seen inside other organizations' tenants, like I know at Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation, they have some nice branding up at the top here with a photo, and then everything here in the app is in their own colors. So you can have your company branding in Power BI in the service. You can also create a theme for your whole organization that every single person needs to use when they build Power BI reports, for example. So we do not have one, but if we had a Blue Raster theme, it would appear here in these options. It would be called Blue Raster, and then anyone who builds a report would be able to use that. There's a third option or alternative. The opportunities are endless, but there's a third item that you can do. I'm sorry, someone's knocking at my door and I'm getting distracted. But you can also create Power BI templates, which a Power BI template file is slightly different from a regular Power BI desktop file. But you can create those templates that you can then require that all of your developers use. So there are 3 really solid ways to ensure that your branding is maintained when you distribute these reports.
Well, if we don't have any additional questions, we want to thank everybody again for spending some time with us. We would love to learn more about your Power BI needs and your questions. Please reach out, email, call us. The phone still works. Email Shannon or myself. There's our email addresses right there on the screen. And Shannon and I are going to stay in the room for as long as it takes if people are shy and they don't want to ask their question in front of the entire group. So we'll stick around for a while. But one question I had for Shannon was, if I have a Mac, can I use Power BI online?
Yeah, I mean, of course you can, yes. So in order to use Power BI online, you do have to have a Microsoft account. So whether or not that is associated with your personal email address, or you have to have a Microsoft account. And actually, that reminds me, I'm going to drop a link into the chat to show you how to do that. So yes, you can use Power BI, and you can use the ArcGIS Maps in Power BI completely online. What you lose there is you lose the opportunity to transform the data. So you do not have the Power Query Editor. You do not have any of that ETL process. You don't have the cleansing. You can't build your relational data model. You lose that. And that, to me, is the real key to all of this.
Thank you. Here are some resources to learn more. We just put a new post up on our blog that has some great Power BI related content. Shannon is forgetting to mention that she is the leader of the Power BI users group for Washington, D.C. And also take a look at tracerecency.org, and you can download. There's some excellent documentation, particularly if you are looking to implement Power BI in other countries around the world, and especially for health.